Hey Flute 360er, Happy New Year. Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab your espresso drink, your favorite notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode 315 is titled Harmonizing Service and Music, Insights from Christian Lampkin's Military Band Career. Attention Flute 360 listener, are you ready to take your flute playing or career to the next level? Have you ever desired to be a part of a flute community but didn't know where to look? Well, look no further because the Flute 360 Accelerator program is open. This evergreen offering allows you to join at any time and become a part of something bigger than yourself. With access to a book club, mastermind, masterclass, and pocket coaching, you'll receive the support and guidance you need to reach your goals. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to accelerate your success as a flutist. To enroll in the Flute 360 Accelerator program today, click the link below in the show notes. Our next meetup is Saturday, January 25th, 2025, from 11 a.m. CT to 1 p.m. CT. See you soon.
Hi, Heidi. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you, Christian?
I'm doing so well. It's so good to hear from you and see you.
It's been a hot second since NFA, so it's so good to see you.
I know, it really has been. It's been so crazy.
Yeah.
Life has just been crazy. Our band actually just got back from a pretty long tour last week for a holiday show. We normally don't take our holiday show on the road, and they wanted to try to do that this time, and it was it was a great success, but it was also just exhausting, taking a Christmas show on the road, which is wild. But how are you? How's Texas?
Good. Thank you for asking. It's been really good. I can't believe we are in the middle of December. So
Right. Yeah. It's been absolutely so crazy, just how fast this year has flown by. I've also been teaching at Hampton University this semester in addition to doing all my Air Force band duties. And so it's just been
oh, wow,
one thing after the other, which has been super crazy, but super cool. And it's just been a joy. So, but yeah, I saw, who did I see recently that I also just saw at the convention? I saw Marian Gadigian a month and a half ago, and we were just cracking up at how NFA felt like it was yesterday, but it was definitely not. So it's just always so funny how quick everything kind of goes. But
I like the pictures on your walls and the setup. It looks really nice and put together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I teach some studio stuff in here sometimes and stuff. It's a good little space, but yeah.
So you were talking about the Christmas show on the road. What is crazy about bringing a show like that on tour?
Oh my gosh. So a lot of our shows for the Air Force bands are just incredibly visual. So it's been wild seeing how much visual things have gone into it. We at one point we were doing a show or a piece of music that was actually a storybook that one of our sergeants actually wrote. It was about an airplane called Robbie the Raptor that was delivering a bunch of toys to children for Christmas and things like that. So we had a projector that was kind of showing that children's book illustration. And then we had one of our sergeants in the band, he got up and narrated the children's story while the projector was going on and the band was playing the background music. So we had stuff like that. We had, just some slideshows of soldiers coming home from deployments and things like that, that was going along with Old Lang Syne and things like that. So our shows are just always so visual. We have singers in the bands too. Mm-hmm. And so so they were doing a lot of, different numbers. We did a Jonas Brothers tune, we did a Barbra Streisand tune, Jingle Bells. So it was, yeah, we were all about doing a lot of really cool visual aspects to our concerts in the military bands. So
That is so neat.
yeah, it's super cool. So it was really great. But yeah, it was a great tour, and our area of responsibility, as we call it, like our AOR, it goes from Maine all the way down to South Carolina, and so our whole concert band, definitely within like the last 20 years, has not been up to Maine as a full concert band. So it was really nice to like get back up to that area, which is the top of our area of responsibility, and just connect with those people and kind of just get out there and let them know that they have an Air Force band, in the region that's like there to, honor, inspire, and connect. So it was really special to be there. And I have a little bit of a tie to Maine because I worked at the New England Music Camp up there when I was in my undergraduate. And so it was really nice to kind of get back up there. I had never been there in the winter.
Okay.
So it was a little funny to be there, in the winter time instead of the summer. Like I remember it from my undergrad years, but yeah, it was a really good time. So
that's awesome. So like during undergrad, you would just jet home because it was winter break.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I would normally just go up there for the summers to work in the New England Music Camp.
Oh, okay. I understand. It was a summer. Mm-hmm. Oh, got it.
Yep. Summer music camp up there that I worked at, which was great. And
well, before we get into any more details of tours and stuff like that, because that's information I would love to dive into with the actual episode talk. I wanted to bring you up to speed and let you in on something because I think you would get a kick out of it. The last time I did a series on military flutists was 4 years ago. Right. 4 years ago. So this is a big deal. And it was episodes 113 through 117. So I say those specific numbers out loud for the listeners. If you guys are listening and you guys are like, I am so blown away by Christian's military band life and career. If you want to hear other flutists in other military branches, definitely check out episodes 113 through 117. So yeah, it's a real treat to come back to a topic like this because it's been a hot second.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the world has seen a lot, since
very
the
true
pandemic and with COVID and things like that, right? So yeah, it's so true that I feel like there's kind of been a heightened interest in the flute community in military band jobs recently, which has been exciting. It's been great.
Yeah. No, I got really into it, and I selfishly brought on 4 or 5 amazing women during that time because I was looking into a military band career life for myself. And I ended up not doing it only because of my age. They basically said, you're in, but because you're right on the brink of whatever that age cutoff was, they said you would have to go to boot camp in 3 weeks. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a quick turnaround. And I thought in my mind, it would have been like 6 months or a year out. But by the time they reversed engineered it and they basically said, no, you would have to go into boot camp like in 3 weeks. And in my mind's eye, I could not wrap my mind around leaving my husband, moving across the country in such a short time span. So I declined, but I was picking those women's brains at the time because I was trying to figure out, like, is this the life for me? And it sounds fantastic. I wished I would have known that it was an actual option for me when I was at an appropriate age. It wasn't a viable option anymore in the season that I was in. But I was so glad that I put together that series because it highlighted a path that I think we don't talk about enough in school as a viable option. And so I was glad full circle to share their stories with flutists like we are going to today. So that way people can have an understanding that this could be a career path for said person.
No, I totally agree with you. And it's funny that you say that because I actually grew up, as from generations of armed service members. So I'm actually a 3rd generation service member. My granddad, he served in the Army. He was a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army. And then my dad, he was actually also an airman. So I'm a 2nd generation airman as well. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny that I have this lineage, and one of the longer lineages in my band, actually. But I was also very ignorant to a lot of things in the career. And
Okay.
so, there are just so many things I wasn't even aware of, just being on a different side of the military, right? And so my father, he was much more, he was actually a security forces officer. And so what those people do is they essentially protect the base. They're the defenders of our installations. So our Air Force bases, places where we hold, important machinery and things like that. And they're also our police officers on base and things like that. And, they do the exact same thing police officers do. They manage traffic, all that kind of stuff, and just keep it a safe place for even the people who are in the military that live on base, a safe place for them to live. So my dad actually did that. I grew up on bases. Like my earliest memories of life are on Air Force bases. I was born in Colorado. And then right when I was like 2, 3 months old, able to get on a plane, we moved to Korea. That's where my dad was stationed. And he actually was a security forces officer for Space Command back then in the 90s, is what it was referred to as. And now we know it as the Space Force. So this was kind of like the Air Force pre-Space Force kind of installations and stuff like that. So my dad was a security forces officer for them. And a lot of my earliest like childhood memories were in Korea. And so once we spent some time out there, he ended up coming back to the United States with his Air Force job. We lived in Oklahoma, Arizona, and then made our way over to Florida for a little bit. And then we were in Colorado. And then my dad actually commissioned. So you have your enlisted structure of officers, your non-commissioned officers that are there, and your senior NCOs and your entry level like airmen. So we have a lot of different tiers, in the Air Force. But he was on that side, on the enlisted side. And then he ended up commissioning and becoming an officer, which are primarily the leaders of, the different parts of the Air Force. And once he became an officer, we actually moved overseas to the Middle East. And so I grew up in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, and my dad actually worked at the American Embassy. And so he was a public affairs officer over there. And to kind of water down like exactly what he did, anytime a big politician or someone like that came to town, he was really in charge of writing their itineraries and making sure they got to where they needed to go. And so he was working in a lot of hotels with a lot of hotel managers and making sure people's stays were just like absolutely excellent. And so I had this awesome privilege of growing up in hotels, like really or hotels, because that's where my dad would work. And so I'd go to school for the day and then end up at these like really fancy hotels at night to meet my dad so he could give me a ride home from school. And so it was kind of a very like different side of the Air Force, and so I didn't really like, see myself going into the military at all. I didn't want to do anything like that, even though I grew up in the Air Force. And so it is kind of funny that I've, kind of found my way into the Air Force now as a flute player. But being on that side, completely different side, it's been great to kind of see how I can contribute, to the branch as well and get back to what it gave to me. So, yeah.
How neat. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Amazing. And I know you are a Flute 360 listener. And so I don't know if you like every now and then popcorn around and hear people's stories, but you were programmed at an early age. And I think it's so fascinating how we try to go out as like young adults and find our way, find our unique path. And we are, but somehow, in some way, we get circled back to the things that we saw in our youth and the things that were programmed in the environment from people and places and experiences and how it fuses together on that career path. And we look back in hindsight and we're like, what? Pinch me.
That's so true. And it's funny that you say that because I feel like this like last couple of years, like in the Air Force, I've really seen just a lot of my initial desires in my career kind of surface back up. And, so I grew up in the Middle East and then, I would come back to the United States every summer and I would go to a summer music camp at Colorado State University. And there I had actually like my first flute lesson ever, like in 8th grade with Dr. Michelle Stanley, who teaches at Colorado State. And it was such a great experience to study with her every summer. And then I would just like go back to the Middle East, for my school years. And she would always be like, this random kid is like, coming from Abu Dhabi and having summer lessons with me. But I went there and she inspired me so much to want to be a flute professor, and that was kind
Mm.
of like what I like really wanted to do is like, I
Yeah.
just wanted to be a flute professor all the way from like, eighth grade. And once I got to my undergraduate, I ended up going to the University of Northern Colorado, where I studied with Dr. James Hall and Brooke Ferguson from the Colorado Symphony. I got so into wanting to be a band director there. It was just such an amazing music education environment there. And
Okay.
it was, a lot of people who wanted to become teachers were at UNC.
Okay.
And so when you have like that, like kind of education environment there,
Mhm.
everybody's just like a people person, And so it was just like such a great fit for me in my undergraduate there. And I just felt like I got really passionate about pedagogy and teaching and helping people.
Mm.
But I kind of got a little bit further away from like wanting to be a flute professor. And then I got 2 degrees in flute performance and music education because I was like, if I want to be a flute professor, I got to be a good teacher, right? And so I just like really wanted to be someone who could fuse both of those 2 degrees together. And I don't know about, the kids coming up nowadays, but I feel like back in my time, it was like, if you're going to do 2 degrees, like you're never going to have time for both. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I felt like I got a lot of like, pushback from people. And especially because, people were like, well, flute is so competitive, like,
Huh.
already. And like, how are you going to be able to like, give 100% to a performance degree if you also want to be a like really serious band director, And so
Huh.
I felt really lost, in my undergraduate coming up, just
Mhm.
thinking about how I was going to combine these 2 degrees that both, apparently like required so much time. And it was pretty disheartening, I think, in my undergrad, seeing some people be very against it that were mentors of mine and some people being like very encouraging of it, because I feel like they saw where the world was going in terms of needing to have a diverse skill set.
Mm.
And so, I was kind of like still not really sure what I wanted to do when I got out of my bachelor's degree. Well, my bachelor's degrees, because I got 2. And then I taught public school in Colorado for a little bit. I taught for about 4 years in the Holyoke School District, which was the most farm town place, the complete opposite of Abu Dhabi you could possibly get. But, I loved it. I loved teaching there so much. It was like 13 miles away from the Nebraska border. It was just plains. It was so country. It was absolutely beautiful, like the complete opposite of the Arabian Peninsula that you can possibly get. And I definitely stuck out like a sore thumb, but it was such a beautiful community. And I think that, the agricultural community there just like really helped me develop an appreciation for just the multiple ways that music can play in people's lives,
Mm.
and I think it was such a different culture than anything I grew up in that it, really just helped me develop my musical testimony, and
Yeah.
why it's important. And just really opened my eyes to how, like I
Mhm.
said, music can just play such different roles in people's lives, and nothing is better or worse, than the way it plays in another person's life. And I think that experience of teaching public school really changed the way I just approach everything, And when I was studying with Brooke Ferguson while I was teaching band, I would drive like 2 hours from Holyoke to Denver to have lessons with her. And Brooke was just, I mean, I know you've, talked to her before too. She's just one of the most incredible flute players ever, first of
Mm.
all, and just one of the most generous people with her
Mm.
time. I mean, I would drive down there for 2 hours and Brooke would give me like a 3 hour lesson, and just like
Yeah.
listen to everything and just be like so encouraging. And I was studying with her pretty consistently. I'd normally go down like twice, maybe 3 times a month. And she did a really great thing where she kind of built her own studio, but would have a lot of studio classes. She founded an
Huh.
academy with Katie Weary down there called the Bel Canto Flute Academy. And she was, just kind of really setting up a place for people who were, freelancing, maybe just graduated with degrees from surrounding universities, and really created a home for us,
Yeah.
and just to kind of help us navigate through this kind of weird time between degrees and like the real world. And I was so fortunate to have, that resource there
Huh.
while I was teaching band. And I was coming up on like my third year of teaching band, and Brooke was just like, okay, it's time for you to go to grad school. And I was just like,
Okay.
wait, is okay, it's time for me to go to grad school, because we would just always sit there and just list out my goals and like what I wanted to do. And, just getting a master's in flute was just something that was always coming up. And
Hmm.
I went to the Midwest Clinic for the first time ever to Chicago, and my school, the public school I was teaching at, paid for me to go because they were doing this really cool thing where they were doing like a small schools initiative. And the school that I was teaching at was a small school. And so they had a lot of sessions that were lined up and geared to help you essentially build a better, instrumental music program in a smaller institution. And so I was super excited, like had my band director hat on, showed up there, and I was walking through the exhibit, and of course I run into the amazing Nicole Esposito,
Uh-huh.
who was there selling La Freaks with, Hans. And I've always loved, Professor Esposito and everything about her teaching and her playing. And it was so great to like finally meet her in person. And I just was so, infatuated with her, knowledge and everything that, I came across when I first met her just in an exhibit hall for like 30 minutes, and starstruck me, I go back to my lesson with Brooke, and I was like, I met Professor Nicole Esposito from the University of Iowa. She's so awesome, and blah, blah, blah. And Brooke was like, you need to apply to study with her, And it was kind of funny because every teacher I had ever had, my high school teacher, James, while I was at UNC, and Brooke, like they had all at one point said that they thought I would work really well with Nicole. And so
Interesting.
it was super like stars
Huh.
align. Like when
Huh.
I finally met her, at NFA, or sorry, at Midwest Clinic. Sorry. When I met Nicole at Midwest Clinic, it was like just like super crazy because it was like, oh, this is the person that like all my teachers have told me that they think I would work really well with, And so she was still doing the flute intensive at the time. And
Okay.
so I finished my uh, third year of teaching. And I sent her an email and was just like, hi, Professor Esposito. Like, I don't think you remember me, but we like bumped into each other at Midwest. She sent an email back in like 3 minutes. And she
Yeah.
was like, nope, I totally remember who you are, and she was like, I'd love for you to like, come to the Iowa Flute Intensive, just send me some recordings, apply online, blah, blah, blah. So I sent it. And then she asked me to come play at the class. And so I was super excited and drove out to Iowa City. It was thankfully only like an 8-hour drive because I was basically living in Nebraska at the time. And I went to the flute intensive, and it was like one of the most life-changing experiences of my life. And
Mm.
I was so happy that I got to, have some initial contact with her. And, I've always told everybody, like, you always just know what school you need to be at. You can
Mm.
just tell right away just from like your initial like vibes and like interactions with the teachers and the people that are at that institution. And like for me, Iowa was just like the
It.
clear front runner. Like, yeah, it
Yeah.
was just it. Like, it was just the spiritual alignment of just like, this is exactly where you need to be. And it was great. And there were like a lot of people that I already knew from like, Colorado that had kind of gone there. And so it was just kind of funny how fate ended up leading me there. And
Mm.
it was a magical 3 years at Iowa for me. I have the
Mm.
highest amount of adoration and respect for Nicole. And I think she just is one of the most dedicated, teachers out there, like full
Aw.
stop, and she gives the shirt off her back, to her students. And
Aw.
I think she's just such an inspiring artist. And, she's always been a lifelong resource for me, even like years
Yeah.
after leaving Iowa. And I'm very much, phased out of the studio at this point, but she still has always been such a guide, and a beacon for all of her students. And yeah, she's just
Aw.
fantastic. And yeah, and I kind of went through a rough, like kind of end at Iowa with the world because the
Yeah.
pandemic hit, and so it was just like this super weird thing of like me not knowing like what to do, and
Mm.
it was kind of funny because Nicole always was like, you need to apply to military band, because she knew I had that
Really?
band director background. Yeah, so she knew I loved band. And I actually, funny enough, was the first student at the University of Iowa to ever get 2 master's degrees. And so the assistantship for the music ed department had opened there while I
Okay.
was in school there. And they actually offered it to me because they knew I had a background in music education, because I was a band director. And so I ended up, having a graduate assistantship in music ed, teaching basic conducting and assisting with advanced conducting. But I was getting my flute performance degree. And the amazing faculty at that school was like, okay, so it's not official yet, but we think we can get you like to be approved to be like the first student to get 2 master's degrees, and so I was
Wow.
like, okay, like, yeah. So I was like kind of ghostly, like taking classes that like I didn't really need to take, but like they were like, yeah, just give it like a year. We think we're going to get it to happen. And then like COVID hit. So
Okay.
then I was like, oh crap, like what am I going to do? I don't want to like graduate and go into the workforce again, and so it was crazy situation, but I had that extra year of funding from the GA. And so I was like, I'm just going to use this third year as like kind of like a performance certificate kind of year,
Okay.
to like get more time with my professor. Cause the master's is just so short.
It
It is
is.
like one of the shortest degrees. It's done in a blink of an eye. And so I was really lucky that I had a third year to kind of just like wait out the post quarantine part of the pandemic. I had applied for a Fulbright and gotten it at the end of my second year at Iowa. And I was supposed to go to the Singing Conservatorium for my PhD to study with James Cordham, who's just
Oh,
like amazing, amazing teacher. And I was so happy, but the pandemic like really got in the way of that,
okay.
unfortunately. And, Australia really took the pandemic very seriously and locked a
Yeah,
lot
they
of stuff
did.
down. And so it kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. And then once I graduated from Iowa with my 2 degrees, I applied for some doctoral programs in the United States. And I was very lucky enough to end up, at the University of South Carolina for a little bit for
Mhm.
my doctorate. And I moved down there, and then I got my first teaching position at South Carolina State University, which I was really honored to, be able to work on my doctorate with the amazing Jennifer Parker Harley and, teach at the same time. It was just like a very rare combination that people have to get like that work experience and that studying experience at the
Mhm.
same time. And it was great. I loved South Carolina. I got out of the Midwest winters, like, who didn't love, just moving to a sunnier place. So it was great. But while I was there, the United States Air Force Band opened up their first ever diversity fellowship. And I had applied to some summer music programs that summer. This would have been summer of 2022-ish. I had applied to some summer music programs, and I even like paid a couple deposits. But when I saw the diversity fellowship opening up for the Air Force Band, I was just like, oh, okay, like my childhood, was like, you can't not apply for this, like you're literally like a product of the Air Force, and so I saw it and I just saw myself written on it. And I saw, my background as someone who is very diverse, kind of like saw all these things kind of aligning for me with this fellowship. And I filled out the application, which was like pretty intense and had some very serious long, short answer questions to answer, and then had to send in a lot of tapes, and I applied for it, not thinking, I was going to get it because it was open to like all instruments. So
Mhm.
I was like, oh man, I'm sure, there's going to be 48 flutes out of like, probably like 90 people that will apply for this thing. And they selected 7 people, and I was one of them, and I was shocked. And so I actually backed out of a couple, festivals that I put deposits down for just because I didn't want to miss this opportunity, and so I went and did it, and it was probably the best week of my entire life to go play in DC with these incredible musicians. And it felt like such a homecoming for me, to like be back on an Air Force base, like, which is something that I grew up on, and to see just like the intersectionality of the military life and the musician life coming
Mhm.
together in a professional way. It was just kind of like seeing myself, in the career in a way that I had not seen it before. And I had the great opportunity to work with Chief Stacy S, principal in that group, Technical Sergeant Kara Daly, who's an incredible flutist as well, also product of Texas too, and former Master Sergeant Megan Enzer, who was my mentor for the week. And they were just incredible flutists and inspired me as people. And now they're my colleagues. So when I finished the fellowship, I actually was informed by them that there was going to be an audition for one of the region bands, which I'm in now. And the bonus of that fellowship was that once you do it, you're actually auto advanced to the live rounds for their military band auditions after that. So thankfully I didn't have to send in a tape, but they only send the audition list out about a month away from the actual audition. And so, so it's a short amount of time. So once I, got in contact with the audition panel for the Heritage of America band here, they sent out the list, and it was quite a long list. I mean, it was a full-on orchestral audition list, and I looked at it and I was just like, it was one of those, again, one of those kind of weird spiritual moments where I was like, I know every excerpt really well on this list,
nice.
And so I was like, yeah, I felt really good about it. I was like, okay, I can get this together in about a month, I think. And it was kind of spooky. And the chamber music pieces that were on there, Trois Pièces Brèves by Ibert, I studied really hard in my undergrad. And so I was like, oh, I actually really know that chamber music piece. And then there was the Laurasian Suite clarion duet with the two flutes. And so, something else that, we all pretty much study in our degree. And so I felt really good about it. And just Lincolnshire Cozy, all the band excerpts, I feel that's the thing that we're all always like, okay, what band excerpts are on this list, because sometimes we study them, sometimes we don't, but I was pretty comfortable with the Lincolnshire ones that were on there. And so I worked with Megan, on the list, who was mentoring me through the fellowship, and just got really, into the audition process for that month, and really, really shutted on it. And ended up going up there with $60 in my bank account. Drove the 6 hours to the audition, stayed with a friend that lived in the area, and ended up having a really good day. It was an 8-hour audition day. There were 3 slots that they were trying to hire for in the Air Force bands, which is rare because flute players do not, leave the jobs very often. And I was the only one they gave a contract to that day. And so I was very lucky. They ended up no hiring for 2 positions. But it was a long day. I was in shock. I didn't expect that day to go my way at all. Cause I had a way different ease than with any audition I had, because, I was in the middle of a doctorate, and I was doing great with that, and I had a teaching job. So I just was like, I really have nothing to lose, however this goes. And I think that just that lack of a judgmental lens on myself, kind of really just put me in a way less judgmental headspace, and I think that even helped me in the practice room, of just kind of knowing that was kind of the case.
Kind of like a non-attachment, right? Where you're just like, well, c'est la vie. If it goes well, great. If it doesn't, no skin off my teeth, because I have a job, I have a degree, I have other things, my eggs in different baskets. And so maybe that in of itself served you well.
Yeah. And, it's kind of funny because I feel at least for a lot of flute players that I've talked to who win auditions, I feel a lot it happens when you're least expecting it, right? When you're just kind of keeping your nose down and doing the work, and you're just kind of not in Alexander technique, they call it end gaining, trying to get to this point where you feel you've arrived at something, when you're just really, just constantly doing the work, appreciating the work, and appreciating the long process of it. You kind of stop limiting yourself, honestly, in terms of where you can go. And you kind of just let the work speak for itself, and one of my other mentors, Eric Lamb, he lives in Vienna, a great flute player. He talks about that a lot with me, in terms of career. I call him my teacher and my mentor, but he's kind of more like my life coach because I talked to him about, the career, and like he's just mentored me through that. And we met, founding the Emoja Flute Institute during the pandemic. And so we've just kind of stayed in good touch together. And he's been a fantastic mentor for me throughout, just the early stages of my professional career. But we talk about that a lot, about just, kind of having faith in the work, and what the work can bring when you just kind of trust it. So, yeah.
I love that. And I love hearing how like these different mentors have really shaped you as a young man, now a man. And, the fact that you are giving them acknowledgement for the work that they have poured into you is really awesome. And so I know each individual mentor is going to be so different in their own capacity because we are unique individuals. But between like Nicole and Brooke and Eric, what's something that kind of like strings them together? Something where like you as the student or pupil really notice like, oh man, these three really have, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but they all acquire this quality, this characteristic that draws me to this personality and this work ethic.
Wow. That's such a great question. You always ask such a great question.
I try.
I could write a dissertation on like every question you give me. I've never actually thought about what all of them have in common similarly, because I feel like I've gained, such different things from each of them. But I think, one thing that I guess I've seen them react to in the world very similarly was actually like, not to go back to it, but like the pandemic, and I feel like when that hit, all three of them were just kind of like, okay. And they just like rolled their sleeves up and just like dove themselves even deeper into their work. You know what I mean? And so I feel like, I think those people have had such huge impacts on me because of how unwavering their dedication to the art and the flute is,
Okay.
and even in times when I've been like, man, is this like really like the path for me? Because I have asked those questions. I think, we all have at some point. I feel like for those three, I've like wondered if they ever have asked that question, and so it's like, it's kind of one of those things. But I think that there's just this unwavering dedication to what their role in the world and in the communities that they serve are. And I think that's a huge thing for any artist, and even with my students, we talk about developing a musical testimony, because I think it really is something that a lot of people call it different things. Like I was doing a class for Erica Boysen like a couple of weeks ago, and she calls it, like your why, like what's your why. And I think that it's such an important thing. But I think the older I get, the more I realize that our whys and our testimonies for what music and what flute playing can do in the world, it changes. And I think that we need to be okay with it being a versatile philosophy and something that is a continuously growing thing based off of our lived experiences. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And I think that that is something that people maybe don't always like really talk about, right? Is about being okay with it changing day to day. And I think that, in this job, especially for me, being a military musician and accepting the identity of an airman on top of my identity as a musician, which are two different things, but need to coexist in order for me to exist. I have a way different purpose for my music making as an airman than I would have as a civilian. And I think it's because of the missions that I have to do. For example, like in our job, we play a lot of retirement ceremonies. We play a lot of promotion ceremonies. We do things like presidential support, like for the inauguration, and so these things that are very important to our society and our country, my music making has a different weight to it, and a different
Yep.
purpose behind it. And so I think that it has been a very interesting thing for me to find out, because it's really informed my artistry,
Hmm.
and the way that I approach the flute, probably in a different way than when I was just a civilian.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can remember correctly, my memory is pretty good, but I remember paraphrasing those five ladies 4 years ago. They said something very similar. And how a few of them, if I can recall correctly, a few of them said that they had to actually make it a point to dive into like solo repertoire and do chamber stuff outside of the marches, outside of the standard rep on the stand for their military branch, because they needed some sort of creative outlet outside of their job. And even though they got to play a lot, that music and the repertoire that's on your stand for retirements, parades, things like that is much different than what they were accustomed to in school and on their own solo tours. So I'm kind of hearing the same answer from you.
Kind of, yeah. I think that's true. It is interesting to talk about this, because I think every military band position is different based off of the mission support, I guess, you're doing. So, like,
Okay.
for example, in my job, I do a lot of chamber music. I play in a woodwind quintet a lot.
Oh, okay.
And I don't necessarily like, I do a lot of concert band as well in my band, but we don't always, we probably do maybe 2 or 3 tours a year. So, which is not as significant of the same amount of tours that like the Deans do. And so I actually have to have quite a lot of versatility in terms of just the settings that I play in, because I'm doing a lot of chamber stuff. I'm doing a lot of concert band. And then I'm also, like I said, an adjunct flute professors too. So I'm still doing like solo recitals and things like that. And so I
Okay.
feel like I have a lot of different versatility in terms of like the arenas that I'm, kind of in as a soloist and as a chamber musician and as a flutist who needs to honk out some sound in a band. So because there's only two of us. But yeah, so I think that I do understand, I guess, from more of like a military service member position of like how someone who has maybe a job that is strictly more ceremonial. So like if they're only doing like ceremonies, that's a way different mission than like what my job is. Just because like our ceremonial brass group in DC, like they have the very important responsibility of doing funeral services for the fallen, at the Arlington Cemetery. That is a very important job, but it is also a very different kind of level and gravity and importance as a mission,
Mm.
in terms of just like maybe I think like, separating like solo repertoire and things like that from that. I find that I personally still in my job am able to connect those worlds maybe a little more in my playing. But I guess I do get kind of where some people, who've been on the podcast before, who maybe have more strictly a percentage of like ceremonial duties, might feel that they get a little further away from maybe like the chamber music and the solo performance repertoire. But I think that's one of the reasons why I love my job is because I still have like, that connection to being able to do that. And my band also, we actually do a chamber recital in the community as a band at least once a year, maybe even sometimes twice a year. And we get to play solo repertoire on that stuff. And so it's awesome, And so I am very thankful for my job, because I feel like it hasn't actually separated me too much, for my solo playing
Nice.
career.
Fair.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
has been great. Yeah.
Thanks for that
Yeah.
clarification. So if there's a younger
Yeah.
360er who is like curious or exploring the idea of being a military flutist, depending on, said branch, what advice would you give to them?
First of all, we're all allies for each other in the armed services, So it's like I think I feel like we do compartmentalize you know,
Mm.
for or at least from the civilian perspective, I think that we do compartmentalize the branches maybe in different categories, but it's
Okay.
not like Hogwarts. It's not like there's Slytherins and like, like Ravenclaws and, like it's really not like we are all like, in a common mission and, and we all collaborate and talk with each other. Like, the Navy, some of my best friends and colleagues are also Navy vandalists. It's not like we don't sit with them
Oh,
at lunch
those
or
are the
anything. Yeah,
Slytherins. We're not
yeah,
going to
yeah,
deal with
exactly.
them.
Yeah, exactly. No, we are all like, a joint force as we, describe it. And we actually do perform together, and like you'll see in DC, like a lot of the musicians are, playing in each other's bands when they need, extra personnel. And same with us. Like we actually just went on a concert band tour, like I was mentioning earlier in Maine and then Massachusetts. And we actually had some of the professors from the Army School of Music in the band with us, so it's
Oh,
like we're
cool.
not,
I didn't
yeah, it
know
was great.
that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We totally collaborate and we will, combine for the common mission of, telling the story of military musicians and honoring and inspiring and connecting with our communities. I mean, just because we're, in different branches does not mean that, that mission is any less important,
Yeah.
in terms of getting accomplished. And so, I guess to answer your question, like, first of all, I would say don't look at, the branches as different, avenues of which one's better to go down. Like they are all fantastic, and they are all incredible opportunities and offer, just different avenues to getting the same, mission done. And I think that is always something that's kind of surprising to me. Even after our concerts, a lot of our performances, we always invite the audience to come talk to us. And I do find that I get that like question of like, why the Air Force and, why this and why did you choose that? I'm like, it was the job I won. I really like, I didn't say I just wanted to join, this band over the other. I mean, I think for me, like, obviously, like we were talking about earlier, I had, this upbringing in the Air Force. And so it's a little more special to me that, I'm able to give back to this branch what it gave to me and my family. I'm very lucky that, I got to end up in the Air Force. But yeah, I think that they're all great. But, I think the one thing that I tell anybody who's auditioning for military groups too is that, it's great that you want to serve your country. It's, as John F. Kennedy said, you serving your country is like one of the most incredible and amazing things that you can do, but I think I really encourage musicians to also understand that with great power comes great responsibility, right? And so it's like you have to accept the identity of being an armed service member, regardless of whatever branch you choose to serve in
Mm.
addition to being a musician. And I think that
Mm.
sometimes people find that out at different times, and it can, I think any job, no matter what you're doing, even being a professor in academia, being a band director, at a institution somewhere, you're going to have your learning curves about the career and find out things that
Mm.
you didn't know, before you get in. And me, like I even said, like, I grew up as an Air Force brat and I still am, and even as an airman, I don't know the vast majority of how amazing the Air Force really is and all the different career fields and all the different ways you can serve even in this one branch, And
Mm.
so I think it's important to just always stay open to that and know that like there's always more to come in terms of like learning about the career field and things like that. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. Very well said. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you for shining a light onto those different answers. It's giving
for
definitely
sure.
food for thought for the listener. Just even how you're pointing out in a very loving way, how you're like, hey, Heidi, it's not as segmented as you think it is. That in of itself, a lot of people you don't know, you know what I mean? And so like, just even that awareness could really put somebody on the right track.
Yeah, I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. Yeah, I'm glad
Yeah.
you asked that question. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So I would love to wrap up this amazing conversation with your pick for the day. So anything in terms of like your favorite book, movie, serial, game, whatever you're like just loving right now that you want to share with the listener.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one of the best books I ever read was during my music education master's at the University of Iowa. And it's a book called Musicking by Christopher Small. And it talks a lot about the act of musicking and what it is and how we interact in communities and in societies in our day to day, and how we can appreciate music, how we can still support music, all without actually, playing our instruments. Like that's not always the only way to support it and to advocate for it.
Mm,
And so I really enjoy that theoretical framework that is kind of rolled out of that book. And I think Christopher did such an amazing job, at kind of empowering
mm,
people, especially in this generation, to kind of really enjoy the beauty that is in how music can play, multiple
mm.
roles in people's lives, And I feel like because I had the experience of being a band director, before kind of pursuing more so a professional flute player path, it kind of aligns with a lot of the things that I feel like I learned,
Yeah.
in like the smallest corner of the state of Colorado, which I did not expect, a lot of my life lessons to like kind of come from. And so I think I encourage everybody, who's an flutists and non, I have a lot of friends that listen to your podcast that are like not even flute players, and so that love everything that you roll out like me. And so I hope that is probably a book that a lot of people check out.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will
Hmm.
definitely put the link in the show notes below. But it
Yeah.
aligns, I love it because it aligns with a lot of the things and a lot of the values that you said earlier, just even the notion in the beginning stages of your career. And you said, like music can hold different roles in people's lives in different ways. And so you do this full circle moment. And at the end of the conversation, you're pointing out a book that, testifies to that notion right there. So I love how it's all interconnected.
Yeah, for sure. It
Yeah.
definitely is.
That's amazing. Well,
Yeah,
thank you
of
for sharing about your military
course.
life. And it's so great to see you again because August till now was, just a blink of the eye. And yeah, so thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for inviting me, Heidi. I love your channel. I hope everybody likes, links, and subscribes because your stuff's amazing. I'm such a loyal 360er, always have been. I road trip a lot and I'm always on your channel. And so, it's just great. And I think, you're making such a important contribution to our community by getting people's stories out there. And I think you're just making the world a better place. And you're also just the right person to do it. And yeah, I just can't thank you enough.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah, of course. Of
Oh,
course.
I love
Yeah.
those words. They mean the world to
Yes.
me.
Good. Good. I'm glad. Well,
Uh-huh.
thank you so much, Heidi. Merry Christmas to you and Eric. Wishing you guys all the best. And we'll
You
chat soon. Okay.
too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. Before you go, do you dream about connecting with like-minded flutists to make new friends for your personal and professional life? What about getting the clarity that you need for your flute career? Wherever you are in your flute journey, I can help support you through your musical goals and aspirations. Join us on Saturday, January 25th, 2025 from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time for personal and musical growth in a supporting community. By joining the Flute 360 Accelerator program, you will start gaining the clarity that you need for your flute career in terms of finding and building the right opportunities for your portfolio career. I'm rooting for you. Click the link in the show notes below and see you soon. Let's talk about flute.